Bitcoiners, hope you're doing well. Tom Mellahan, great to see you. Hope life is good. I'm going to take a preemptive sip of coffee here before I acknowledge what you might be able to see behind me, right? I see a little sun splash coming in. I don't want to take away the anticipation about what it is. What is it? Good morning, Bitcoiners. B for victory with a fleur de lis in there. We love the fleur de lis. Morning, Justin. Hope it went well last night. Hope you had a lot of fun nuclear chats. I was chatting with nuclear Bitcoiner this weekend in Canada, so I was happy to see him on the list. I didn't realize it was going to be him. So there you go. Bon matin et bon Saint-Jean en avance. Good morning, everyone. Where do I sats? Good morning to you too. Just to reiterate, folks, it's a happy train of fireworks we enjoy here on the border. I'm currently in Vermont, but I'll be heading tomorrow to Quebec, just over the border. And the way all these fireworks work, if you're from Quebec, is you get the Saint-Jean-Baptiste, which is called the Fête Nationale, the national holiday of Quebec, which is tomorrow. Looks like we're going to have a bit of rain, so probably the fireworks are going to get off-put. But then a week later, exactly 1 week later, we have Canada Day. And then a few days after that, we have July 4th. So we're doing great on fireworks. We're going to have a lot of fun. Bitcoin Graffiti is the board. And Bitcoin Graffiti, let me thank you because this board is the result of some synchronicity. You actually suggested this exact board to me a few days ago, and I happened to see it this morning on War Clandestine's Twitter feed. So I said, the board is done. We got to do it. So there you go. It made sense for what we had going on. Heaven Grayson with that great name again. Good afternoon from Tanzania. Indeed, it is afternoon there. Great to see you, Heaven. Thanks for coming. You got a bit of a lesson on fireworks in Quebec. Wow, death and dying, great. Yeah, it's so not, well, kind of, yeah. It is the grief one, so we're doing that, right? It's the 5 stages of grief, which is why I called this morning's gathering Mourning in America, right? Remember that was a very famous political speech by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. It is Mourning in America. What he meant was what I'm looking at outside. We got a sunrise, everyone. Indeed, the sun came up this morning, right? We're great. We got the sun splashes coming in and Bitcoin's running. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Justin says, great panel. Could have kept going after 9 minutes. Yeah, he's a really interesting guy. And I spoke with his wife, who's also a nuclear technician. Really interesting family. Really liked chatting with them. And it makes you think that Canada is not a lost cause when you meet people like that. And indeed, I was very optimistic after meeting all those Canadians this weekend. Wisconsin as well, indeed. So for those of you saying out there that if you don't know, what we do is sometimes because of the Japanese Ohio gozaimasu, which is good morning, sometimes we name other states for good morning on this show. Good afternoon from Nigeria. Heaven, not sure what you mean by how about Tanzania. I really want to go. I've never been there. I'm the only Tanzania who always attend Bitcoin Magazine. Wow, thanks a lot. And I am both desirous of making it to Tanzania. One day I shall take the train from Cape Town to Kenya, and along the way you pass all of these things and places like Tanzania. So I'll definitely do it. I'm a big train guy, so I've taken the train across Russia, Canada, of course, everywhere in Europe and Japan. I took it across India once, so I'm a big train fan, and the one missing from my list is through Africa, and I will do it one day. Probably not this year or next, but it will happen. And I won't make it to Nigeria on the show, but Timothy Olamide, we're happy that you made it. We're not going to be talking about Nigeria today, but it does come up from time to time. We're happy about it. And I noticed the other day lots of people in Lagos and having a great time. So a lot of optimistic people over in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm a fan. I think things are going to work out just great there. And I'm so happy that you guys have so much, Bitcoin uptake, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin acceptance as the end of grief, right? So we got the board. Thank Bitcoin Graffiti for it. He's the one who gave me the tip. And here's a little bit more. We're going to get to this whiteboard in a minute, but Bitcoin Graffiti giving us the background that he thinks it comes from a Kubler-Ross's book on death and dying, the 5 stages of grief. Before we talk about the stages of grief, I know what everyone here wants. A little bit of Moscow time. What's the fakest news I can find? There's a ton today. There's a ton. So everyone lining up. We're going to do the Joe Rogan fake news first, right? The Joe Rogan fake news first. So Vox. Joe Rogan wants a debate on vaccine science. Don't give it to him. How to have better conversations about contentious scientific subjects. Thanks, Karen. Karen wrote this. Thanks, Karen Landman. Excellent, Karen. This is from the Washington Post. If Joe Rogan asks you to debate, be suspicious, right? Be suspicious, right? Don't give it to him. So those are what we got for our good man, Joe Rogan. But remember, I said there was a whole new genre of Moscow time coming, right? And this genre of Moscow time was going to be RFK focused. I think I started to say it a few weeks ago when he started to really make rumblings and I saw his poll numbers were starting to rise. And I, of course, easily predicted that there would be a slew of fake news about him. And boy, do we have some good ones. They're getting the fake news fired up, right? The engine is going. And so what do we got here, right? We got the Huffington Post, which says that Robert F. Kennedy says Russia acted in good faith in Ukraine. Geez, what he's out there saying they're acting in good faith, right? Oh my goodness, what a terrible guy. Here's a new one from the New Republic. RFK Jr. gives away the game with decision to speak at Moms for Liberty event. So he gave away the game because he spoke at an event with the Moms of Liberty. And the New Republic goes on to say, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has a long history of spreading conspiracy theories. Jeez, what a loser. Including science, pardon me, including since before COVID-19 saw a resurgence of anti-vaxxers. And his fringe ideas often come with a racist, of course he's racist, or a homophobic twist. So it's not just that he's an anti-vaxxer, guys. He's a homophobe and a racist too, right? So you can believe these people. They're great. There's more. There's more. We're not done, right? I said there were going to be a lot. There's a lot. Time magazine jumps in yesterday. Edward Nirenberg, close to Nuremberg, right? Maybe he won't get dropped out of an airplane. Maybe he can save himself. We'll see. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is dead wrong about vaccines, right? He's dead wrong. How about this one from the Huffington Post? Democrats unload on huge anti-vaxxer Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The scion of one of the country's most famous political families hasn't won over many prominent fans in his party for his 2024 challenge for the presidency. CNN's Jake Tapper. Jake! He said he would refuse to debate Kennedy. He would refuse. Come on. He's so dishonest, right? So what did he go on to say in the article? He says that he spreads dangerous misinformation about childhood vaccines. It's not even vaccines. It's the childhood vaccines, right? So he lies frequently, he says, right? He lies frequently. Microsoft back at it. They didn't have enough yesterday. They had to come up with another one, right? Explosive revelations, a journal belonging. It says journal, right? They haven't mentioned a word about Hunter Biden's daughter's journal, all right? But they got his journal. That a journal belonging to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. reveals extramarital dalliances with 37 women lasting over a decade. Woo, terrible. So that's what I got today. It looks like a pretty rotten guy, right? And the good news is Tucker Carlson also copied this storyline, right? So Tucker Carlson did another episode last night, episode 6, titled Bobby is Winning. And we've been saying that for a while, right? We've been saying it for a while. So what did he do? He did his whole show. It was about 18 minutes long. Viewership was higher this morning than the last one, so it does sort of toggle, right? We've been paying attention to the viewership total of the Tucker Carlson show now that it's on Twitter. The numbers this time slightly higher than last time, so it is sort of inching up. So what did he do in the episode? He broke down the media and the Democrats' establishment's war on RFK Jr. ever since this Hotez thing, right? Once the Hotez doctor thing got going, there's been a lot of attack ads, right? So we predicted it a few weeks ago. A little bit started, but this week it's been a deluge of all of these things. And so Tucker even broke it down in contrasting the media's antagonism towards Trump versus RFK Jr. in the early stages of both of their careers. So what he did was he said, for example, the first attack ad that was created in the New York Times about Trump's candidacy was sort of like many paragraphs into the article, and it was like, but a lot of people don't like him, and he says crazy stuff, right? And Tucker's here says there's never been a candidate for president the media hated more than Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You thought that the title belonged to Donald Trump, but go check the coverage. Trump got a gentle scalp massage by comparison when he announced, right? So not a lot of people remember that. It did. I remember it took a while for people to take Trump seriously, let's say. I remember when I said he was going to win, I walked into a room of senators, right? And I said, guys, this guy's going to win, right? I was just finalizing my Bitcoin report that I created for the Senate of Canada in 2015. We were about to table it in Parliament. We also tabled it on Bitcoin's blockchain using op return script at the time. So that was already 8 years ago. And so when I was tabling that report, I was still working with the Senate Banking Committee in Canada, and I happened to have heard the Mexican rapist announcement speech that Trump gave. And when he gave the Mexican rapist speech, I said, well, this guy's going to win. Like, this is the greatest speech I've ever heard. And I walked in, and now you had many astute political people in the room, of course, senators, right? They're not idiots. When it comes to politics, a lot of them are idiots. But what they all said was, yeah, maybe if he's serious. No one believed that he was serious about running. And I said, I think he's serious, right? But you had to have that caveat at the early Trump announcement because he had done it before. He sort of said he announced, got the attention, and then backed away. Said he was going to announce and run, and then got the attention and backed away. A lot of people were suspicious that in the 2016 or the 2015 announcement for the 2016 run, he would do the same. I said, no way. I think it's real. I think he's actually going to do it. And indeed, he did it. But that whole idea of not taking him seriously at first, not going to be replicated with RFK Jr., people right away moving against him. And indeed, Tucker was correct to point this out. So he did sort of what I do with the New York Times, with the fake news, Moscow Times stuff, right? So, you know, how I would break down the fake news about RFK. I'm adding it as an extra addendum to Moscow Time when there are specific RFK Moscow Time stories. I'll always bring them to you. He brought the collection of them yesterday, just talking, Tucker did, about the entirety of the coverage. And then he focused really on the debate between Hotez and Tucker. We've talked, Hotez and RFK. We've talked the thing for a while, but more and more of these videos that you see that shows what a liar he is, it gets even funnier, right? Because he does the same thing. You know how I mentioned that they lump in the RFK criticisms with that he's also racist and that he's also a homophobe, right? There's a whole compilation now about Hotez saying that people who doubt what he says are always obviously white nationalists, right? But at the same time he says it, I can't help but strike that he's got like the most pale white skin and unhealthy looking tone that I've ever seen. He looks deathly, right? He really doesn't look great. And I could see why. Like, I don't think it was scripted that when Rogan, when Hotez was on Rogan's show and Rogan sort of pushed him, like, why should I listen to you? You look like a fat lump of shit, right? Like, you don't really look healthy, right? And so we don't fat shame on this show, right? We don't do that. So this was, saying that, I meant it for this Hotez guy, right? We're very conscious of people's struggles around here. But he really looks unhealthy, right? We gotta mention that. And so that whole idea of him being so unhealthy, I think when you hear him go out there and say, "Oh, it's just we're just really troubled by all the white nationalists who are spreading propaganda." He even blamed Hotez, even blamed Putin for the anti-vaccine stuff, right? Of course, it was Putin. It was Putin and the white nationalists, right? So this story, I think, becoming more and more relevant, and I think the same mistake that was made with Trump was that once they started to really hate him, they turned the dial up and created more hatred, fake news towards him, which gave him more attention. And I think that's what's happening here with RFK. The more hit pieces are written about how people are afraid of him because he trains dogs and birds, and that he had all these women, and that, oh, by the way, he used to be a heroin addict. And by the way, everyone in his family says he's crazy and you shouldn't have confidence in him. I think it's just going to add more and more attention to it. I think it's just going to create a situation where more and more people feel that indeed his campaign is going somewhere. And just like Tucker said, he's winning, right? When you get this kind of treatment, it's because you're winning. Remember what I said a few weeks ago, that the biggest red flag in America today is that Joe Biden and the sitting president, who doesn't look like he's doing great in the polls or anything. It's not like America is doing awesome. We don't need to know the actual numbers, right, about how well he's doing or not. You'd think that a candidate in his position would want to campaign. So the biggest red flag in America right now is that he's not even campaigning. Like, what does that mean, right? Pretty sure he's going to win. Should he be so certain that he's going to win? Maybe, right? There's a lot of stupid people in America. But it, to me, seems like the attention itself and all of those things really comes from the sort of covert campaign. You can't really put Biden out onto the hustings to go and give speeches because he can't really talk great anymore. Brain not quite working. So the best that can be done is hit pieces on RFK. But unfortunately, there is a Newtonian principle at work here, which is the equal and opposite reaction. Newtonian, a third principle, right? The amount of energy that goes in is the amount of energy that's going to come out. And so it looks like the more attack ads they throw on him, just like with Trump, the more he's going to be winning. And that's why Tucker came to that conclusion. So, but that's not all that's going on, right? It's the anger part and the denial part, let's say, of the Bobby Kennedy campaign does fit into these 5 stages of grief that we've got here. So this came from War Clandestine, and he was talking a little bit about the vaccine story, that in many cases, the vaccine story is flipping to anger, which is the second stage of the progress through the grief cycle. So it starts with denial, goes to anger. Bargaining, of course, is where things head next. Depression afterwards, and then finally acceptance. I've got Bitcoin acceptance here because that's what we're going to work up to. We're going to talk about Bitcoin acceptance in this context. So now we know that, look, there's never going to be a debate, right? Hotez is not going to debate RFK. RFK is not going to be able to get on stage. You're getting a lot of denial, right? So there's still a ton of people, especially on that file, stuck in denial, right? The medical establishment is true. They were honest. They said all these things. More and more are coming through to anger, though, right? We're seeing more and more people. And I think RFK is going to shepherd a lot of people from denial to anger. But unfortunately, he's the main reason why people are angry, right? He's the one who's absorbing the anger, just like Trump absorbed a lot of people's anger when it comes to Trump exposing the way Washington worked. And that was sort of the magic of Trump, right? That he broke so many people, that the people who couldn't get through the stages of what he was saying, like even bargaining with him or accepting Trump for who he was and what he was talking about, they sort of got stuck in these stages of grief because that's what Trump in the end represented. That's why, as a Bitcoiner, right? I was absolutely a Trump fan from the beginning, not because of policies, but because of his capacity to warp reality and change everything, right? That's what he was so important for, that his mere presence would just break people. And it broke many people. You know, it broke a lot of my friendships. Like, you didn't really understand the cost of Trump when it first came out, but when he first came out. But I never wavered. I just understood personally that it was a bit of a band-aid, ripping off a band-aid situation. Having him there would destabilize people's understanding of so many institutions that I thought were rotten to the core at the time. I was already over my stages of grief by then. I'd been working in politics and I had accepted that the thing was broken, right? Which is what brought me to Bitcoin. So knowing that political institutions wouldn't be the way we would solve this. I had already worked to that point. I'd gotten into law school. I'd already worked at sort of the highest levels of executive politics in Canada, and it wasn't going to work. We were not going to get done what we needed to get done to actually have change, which is why a lot of political people around the time of Occupy Wall Street and all that were attracted to Bitcoin, because we had sort of given up on the levers of politics. There was no way we were going to be able to forget what happened after the financial crisis and the aftermath of that. And just exactly, if you understood what was going on, you knew that they were selling the farm, right? That there was no getting out of the trouble that we were in. And Bitcoin offered a sort of a quick route to understand these stages of grief. And that's why, you know, I find it such a interesting sort of simulation wink that the last stages of grief are acceptance, and Bitcoin acceptance is, from a commercial point of view, sort of what everyone is focused on in the business of Bitcoin, right? It's Bitcoin acceptance. And Bitcoin acceptance isn't just like, oh, I take Bitcoin to sell you stuff, right? Bitcoin acceptance goes a lot deeper than that, right? It's not just a payment channel, right? That's not a payment channel. Bitcoin acceptance is a deep-rooted psychological orientation that helps you navigate your way through the world. That's why Bitcoiners sort of just eat popcorn when we see all of these stories. And that's also why we don't get crazy distracted. Look at this ridiculous case that we're talking about the past few days with the submarine, right? Now, I understand some Bitcoiners want the entertainment, but how many Bitcoiners were really like, oh, everything we're learning about the submarine is true? Because this morning we found out some pretty terrible things about the submarine and the whole story. And they look like this, right? So on the same morning, on the same few days where Hunter Biden was, I guess, indicted or charged or whatever it is, whatever thing he did with the IRS and the gun, and he's a drug addict, right? But there's no prison time. But yesterday, the IRS whistleblower came out with a new revelation, right? According to Jonathan Turley, according to Zero Hedge, IRS whistleblowers release new bombshell evidence against Biden's DOJ and AG Garland. So it turns out that over the past few days, we found out anyway that Garland suppressed several interviews, several investigations on the sex stuff that Hunter Biden was engaged in. And in particular, there's one line where Hunter calls the Chinese guy who's giving him money and says, or emails him and says, "I'm here next to my dad," right? So Joe Biden had always said, "I didn't know anything about my son's business dealings. I have nothing to do with the money." But we've seen on a few instances now that 10% goes to the big guy. We don't know what that means, right? We don't. I don't know what that means. Looks like it means Joe, but I'm open to another explanation. But someone has to ask the question, right? And someone has to provide an answer. We've never heard any of that. So it turns out that he did say, "I'm next to my dad. Why didn't you send the money?" More or less, like, why didn't you send the commitment, or why didn't you fulfill the commitment? But it was clearly about money. So lots of people now wondering. Jonathan Turley comes out with a whole article today saying, in the New York Post, "Hunter is resolved. Washington celebrates the end to the Biden corruption scandal." And he breaks it down saying the report is full of very specific accounts of actions that warrant investigation. Allegations are not proof. However, even if half of these allegations are proven, the Hunter Biden investigation itself could prove a serious scandal in the making. The only thing that is clear that these whistleblowers have made unsettling charges, and that Congress has ample basis for using its oversight and subpoena powers to force answers to these questions. The effort to resolve Hunter has been a concerted effort by the political and legal establishment. It may not, however, work in light of the newly released evidence from the House. Now, at the same time, Hunter, right, the simulation winking again. There's a submarine, the hunt for Red October. Now it's the Hunter, right, Red October. So it turns out some people are saying that the American military understood days ago, that the submarine that everyone's been tracking by the Titanic was gone. So apparently they've known for days, and that the sound when it broke, the banging sound that everyone's been talking about, was not people begging for help. It was the actual hull imploding. And so there's lots of people now who say that they had evidence. So the Wall Street Journal reports this morning, Wall Street Journal news exclusive, U.S. Navy detected Titan sub implosion days ago. And so a lot of people asking questions about that, right? So the Wall Street Journal reported the U.S. Navy had evidence of implosion days ago. We got a week of freezing, suffocating, panic analysis, and banging every 30 minutes BS. In the meantime, Hunter escapes front and center. Let's hear it for the media. Other people, Benny Johnson says, wait, if the submarine exploded on Sunday and the Navy knew about it the whole time, that means the entire U.S. military picked up a banging noise on the seafloor. News cycle was a lazy psyop to keep the story going. They lied. This was all a distraction. God help us, evil. Jack Possebeek, holy schlit. The Wall Street Journal is reporting the U.S. Navy detected the Titan implosion on Sunday, but Biden held the news until today's whistleblower testimony on Hunter. The entire thing was a distraction op. Now, I don't know if it was a distraction op. I don't know. No one knows. They're saying they know. They don't know, right? But it looks that way. It doesn't look very good, right? And let's go through the stages of grief again, right? So on some files here, right, on some files, we see there's anger. That's the RFK thing with the medicine, right? I don't think you have a lot of people out there saying, oh, the vaccines worked, right? You get some. But you get other people saying like, well, no, the anger is the better way to deal with RFK. Just call him a bunch of names. He's a racist, don't forget, right? He's a homophobe, even worse. In Pride Month, can you believe he's out there in Pride Month, the whole month, and he's not honoring the month, and he's saying within the month that vaccines are bad, especially for Black people, right? Because he's been making that point that they're especially bad for Black people. And, geez, what are you doing, right? Can't do that. And how can he have any respect? How can we take him seriously, right? So the anger is definitely there. But on a lot of the political issues, right, we're still in denial, right? We're still in denial. So the stages of grief, people are working through them on multiple levels, right? It's not just the stages of grief when it comes to one issue, right? We're talking about all kinds of pieces of society sort of decaying before our eyes, right? So there's the medicine one that we can see brings to, the denial piece, right? The anger piece, the political one, because it's a lot for Americans to imagine. It is a lot for Americans to imagine that politics are this corrupted, right? It's a lot to look at. And we've been talking about that. Really, that's why we call this show The Breakup. That's why we call it that, right? It's hard for Americans to look at the carnage that their political order has created within their own country. Now, I'm super bullish on America, right? And I always have been. But it's not the political institutions that won World War II that I'm bullish on. I'm bullish on American appetites to get through these stages of grief and not linger in denial and linger in anger, right? More and more people are sort of pulling away and getting out of this trap. And that's where we can even see the Bitcoin story taking shape here, right? And it comes into the bargaining section, right? So here's the good news. Bitcoiners, I would think, who have been able to sort of already orient themselves with Bitcoin acceptance throughout their worldview, right? But Bitcoiners are a very small minority, right? You need more out there. So the mass group of people that are politically engaged still in the denial section, some filtering out into the anger section, especially when their only politically engaged subject is medicine, right? But what we've seen over the past week with the large financial incumbents, right? BlackRock entering Bitcoin, Citadel, Fortress, this French bank yesterday, Deutsche Bank, right? All the biggest players all of a sudden talking about Bitcoin, putting out Bitcoin plans, Bitcoin projects, Bitcoin products. All of that's been happening over the past few days. Now, lots of people out there angry in the Bitcoin world because it looks like they rug pulled the entire incumbent industry. Some people from the Bitcoin world don't care so much because it was sort of crypto that they rugged, right? But what I see here is the financial sector, who are sort of the least sentimental about any of this, already progressing through bargaining where they're trying to negotiate with Bitcoin coming into the system. And it kind of mirrors, to me anyway, it mirrors the human migration that we've already seen peel into Bitcoin. So one of my most favorite predictive models that I've ever come up with and that has been helpful for me in my work in this industry has been the human resources that peel into Bitcoin and the order in which they peel into Bitcoin or divert into Bitcoin and the numbers with which they come in. So the original Bitcoiners, right? Bitcoin ground floor are the cryptographers, right? The cryptographers. So the cryptographers had already dealt with a lot of the stuff intellectually before. They'd already negotiated, and some of them were even in the depression stage, right? Like, I bet you if you would go and ask Adam Back what his life was like before Bitcoin was actually shared in the white paper, with the knowledge that he had about the infiltration of national security into the finance sector. You know, he was an original cypherpunk, so someone who understood the reasons why you would make cryptography counted as a munition or a bullet or a missile. So if any of you are new here and you didn't know that, from World War II on, until the 90s, really, until the 90s, cryptography was illegal, right? It was classified as weapons. Americans could domestically produce it, but they couldn't export it. They were not allowed to share any knowledge. It was counted the same as sharing military secrets. It was the same as sharing bomb plans. It was the same as sharing nuclear secrets, right? It was a big no-no. There was no such thing in university as cryptography. It was completely banned. If you happened upon it on your own, you were more or less paid to work for the national security apparatus. You were not allowed to independently produce this stuff. The people who did independently produce this stuff were the people who invented public key cryptography because they knew something that the internet was coming. And only because of that was there enough negotiating power in the private sector to get a lot of public key cryptography deployed commercially, right? And there was still a ton of fights. You can go back and read the fights in the 1990s before Bitcoin, when we were negotiating cryptographic implementations in the North American legal system and commercial system. The arguments that the folks who went for this stuff, so it was mostly on the Clipper chip. So the Clipper chip was the microchip the government was asking the chip makers to make, which had a backdoor right into the chip. It was more or less a way to ignore the cryptographic security put on any information stored in a hard drive using a microprocessor. So this was a huge debate, and you can go and read any of those testimonies from the 1990s, and they will read like any Bitcoin advocacy argument that you've seen over the past 10 years. You can literally replace the words cryptography with Bitcoin, and it's the same talk, right? If you're out there looking to make a Bitcoin lobbying speech and you want something better than AI and ChatGPT, just go read Whitfield Diffie's testimony on the Clipper chip for US Congress from 1990, whatever, and what you'll get is something perfectly tailored for Bitcoin advocacy and Bitcoin lobbying and all of that stuff. So, you know, cryptographers were already going through this world here. And when Bitcoin came, they were sort of already at the precipice for acceptance for what it could mean. That's why they got it so quickly, right? That's why you had Hal Finney and these people sort of negotiating like, well, if the whole world's economy goes on Bitcoin, each coin will be worth, you know, at the time before all the crazy inflation, $1 million of Bitcoin was enough to actually factor the entire economy, right? And it's no longer that, right? This was many, many years ago. I think it's at 10, you know, it's 10x of that or something. So anyway, at the time, that was sort of the big thing, right? Now, Bitcoiners were able to get through a lot of this stuff over the past few years, and that's why they're such playable characters to this day, right? They're over the stages of grief. They're not caught up in any of these traps. But let's go back to the human migration into Bitcoin, right? So the cryptographers are first. The political people are next, right? The political people are next. And in some ways, those political people who, like myself, abandoned politics as a solution, I was very clearly in the depression like, I don't think I was outwardly depressed or anything like that, but I didn't know what I was going to do with my life because I knew I couldn't continue in politics. I knew it was a dead end, and not, I mean, I had a fancy job, but it was a dead end spiritually, professionally. There was no way to go that way, right? So it wasn't going to make it, right? So this whole aspect of depression, I kind of just couldn't conjure a vision of the future until I saw Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin allowed me to get past that last stage of grief for what I was mourning. And, because I was even a person, for example, I ran for what we call Parliament in Canada, but it's Congress in the United States, right? Simply because the Prime Minister asked me to, right? And in those days, you kind of had these like noble ideas. Well, if I'm asked by the Prime Minister, geez, what an honor, I got to do it, right? So now if like a Prime Minister asked me to do it, I'd be like, well, like, is that a good idea for me? No, probably not, right? It wasn't a bad idea. It was a great experience. No regrets about running for that. It was actually a great experience. But I sort of marvel at the hokiness of my worldview at the time. Well, the Prime Minister asked me, wow, I got to do it, right? I would never think like that again. But that's the world we were in, right? I was still in my 20s. I was very young and all that kind of stuff. So it was not, again, happy I did it, great experience. But this idea here of acceptance, right, for Bitcoiners has a lot to do with a lot of those political people who were already giving up on politics. The whole Ron Paul, Occupy folks, all of these folks were sort of done with politics, right? And we're looking for something new. So that's the second of these human capital migrations into Bitcoin that I observed, right? So it went cryptographers first, political people next, but the third group, right? And that's the one I want to talk about now in the stages of grief. It's the Wall Street folks, right? They were the first non-sentimental people to arrive, and they came differently, right? They didn't come from necessarily depression. They didn't come from anger. They were not, well, some did come from depression, and I'll explain those ones. Those ones were like the Arthur Hayes people, right? There are people out there who want real risk, that are real traders, that want to do the risk thing. And after the '08 thing happened, the financial crisis and the backstop and all the free money and the quantitative easing and the bailouts, what they ended up deciding was Wall Street was actually a porno, and you couldn't, for real, right? There was no more thrusting. There was no more contact. There was no more risk. There was nothing to risk, which made it pornography, not the real thing, right? Not better than the real thing, much worse than the real thing. And in that way, they started to peel into Bitcoin because they were sentimental about actual risk. But they're not the same, right? Other people that joined simply saw profit, simply saw motive, which we love them for, right? This is not a judgment of them. We don't need sentimental. Not everyone in Bitcoin has to be sentimental about it. They were actually a really helpful measuring stick for Bitcoin and was great, right? So what I see now, right? So this is part of the news this morning, is that Emmanuel Macron just had a bunch of African leaders and all kinds of folks around, right? And he says that there is now complete consensus to reform global financial institutions, right? So now it could look like, oh, this is another '08 thing, blah, blah, blah. But Macron was also asking to be involved in the August BRICS 2 meeting. He's the only one of the G whatever going to the BRICS 2 meeting. So this is what we're about to get in the month of August, by the way, guys, right? So as Bitcoin is getting steam, as we're getting attention, as we're gathering energy, as we're moving into this political season that I predict will have Bitcoin in the front and center of every debate, every argument, What we're going to get in August looks like this. You get the Jackson Hole Federal Reserve meeting, right? So they all meet in Jackson Hole, right on top of that super volcano in a park named after Rockefeller. And they meet in this sort of, mountain house looking at the Tetons, right? One of the most energetically important parts of America, one of the most beautiful parts of planet Earth. Imagine super volcano below you, a super volcano, right? So you're on top of a super volcano. The Grand Tetons. If you guys don't know what the Grand Tetons look like, they're probably the only thing nicer than my view here in Vermont, right? These are some of the most spectacular, gorgeous mountains on Earth. They look like pyramids, right? They're just spectacular. So they go there and they talk about, oh, what we're gonna do with the Fed Reserve and what. But about a week before that, right? So they probably have an agenda. It's gonna be, they're all excited. A week before that, BRICS 2 is going to meet, right? So they're almost meeting concurrently. BRICS 2 is going to meet. Maybe Bitcoin is going to be on the agenda, but it won't matter. All of these things are going to be about the competing BRICS 2. They're going to lay their brick shitcoin there at the meeting. Macron is going to be there. But all of this is going to force people to start talking about the financial system, right? We are going to move right into the bargaining stage for this third cohort that came into Bitcoin now at scale. Not just the ones who didn't like Wall Street because it was a porno, the whole industry with these incumbents, with BlackRock, with everyone now coming with Bitcoin products. You're actually going to see bargaining and negotiating about the money behind the system. So in the same way that we've seen these human migrations come to Bitcoin, it's starting to move up to the global scale, not just a few finance people. Anyone who's interested in finance is going to have to talk about Bitcoin now, one way or the other, right? So the political people caught in some forms of denial, the science people caught in anger, but now that the money thing is happening over here, it's going to actually bring this non-sentimental cohort, right? The people who aren't passionately on a political side and have a broken brain, the people who are not passionately on the side of scientific media, basically just the normal people, right? So Bitcoin is going to enter the normal conversation. And once it's in the normal conversation, you're going to have, there will be more depressed people, but we're going to be talking about Bitcoin acceptance at scale in the world, on planet Earth. Bitcoin acceptance being discussed at that level will be a fast track for people to sort of get through these stages of grief, right? Because you're not going to get any of these people, these people who were, Adam Schiff got censored, right? And what did Adam Schiff, he's the biggest liar in the history of US politics. He should be dropped out of an airplane with Fauci, right? They should go up to Spaceline, right? Where Tom Cruise used to jump for the Mission Impossible movie, and they should push Schiff out of there, right? He should be publicly executed, right? But it's never going to happen, obviously, just based on the damaging lies that he's told, right? These are really damaging lies. But what happened yesterday when the lies led to his censure? Well, he goes on the same shows that are calling RFK a homophobic, racist, anti-vaxxing liar. And he goes on those shows and they're like, would you do it again? And he's like, yeah, I would do it all again, right? I had to stand up to Donald Trump, right? So there's people who are never going to be able to admit this stuff, right? There's people who are so broken, their brains are so twisted that the stages of grief need like a fast track. And that's what Bitcoin ends up being, right? It ends up being the honorable way of getting over all of this stuff. It is the fake reason. Like sometimes you just need a reason to forget things and stop fighting about things, right? It doesn't even have to make sense. It's a fake reason, right? But you can have these fake reasons all the time. It's just an excuse to let something go. Sometimes you need, because of our egos or whatever, a fake reason to just say, I'm done with that, right? I'm done with that. And Bitcoin is that reason. When Bitcoin acceptance happens, right, these stages of grief can start to be ignored by others. You're not going to have as many people who need to deny that American political systems are corrupted and beyond repair. They're beyond repair. We're not repairing this shit. We're abandoning it. We're doing new stuff, right? And I think it's going to be new political parties, new ways of orienting DC, which is why I'm so keen on RFK continuing to be cheated by the Democrats. I'd love to see him run independent. It would be great to punish the two-party system. It would be excellent to be able to have that opportunity. And I think most Americans who are moving through these various stages, the ones that are in depression, the ones that are in the bargaining stage, the ones who have forgotten these corrosive stages of grief, the anger and the denial pieces, those folks, I think, are going to be more susceptible to using Bitcoin for cognitive closure to get over grief, because that's what it can be, right? Bitcoin acceptance from a commercial point of view also has implications psychologically. Accepting Bitcoin psychologically allows you to see just how corrupt the money was. And if you follow that money, you'll end up seeing where all the other corruption can be. It's the same idea that we've seen RFK suggests, right, with his peace speech a few days ago, where he remembered that when his uncle was talking about the projection of war abroad, right? He wasn't really even in the war yet. He really didn't do much of Vietnam. When Vietnam, Bobby Kennedy Sr., just like Martin Luther King Jr., said that America, if it's going to export war, simply cannot stop that same exportation from being conjured within America. Right. So it became one of these situations where America, with projection of violence, was actually manifesting a type of Jungian shadow inside of it, filled with violence. Right. And indeed, America has never been safe since the Vietnam War. It hasn't. Right. Like you can go in 1950s America, you go look at all those YouTube pictures of people with their camcorders and all that. American cities, Baltimore, Philadelphia, these are beautiful, walkable cities. It used to be that Europeans would come to American cities just to enjoy the safety and the cleanliness. And it's absurd these days, right? To think about that. The only one left, the only North American city that I know of that is still at the scale that Americans should be at is Montreal. That's why I live there. It's the only one, because they don't bother with the fake news and all that stuff, right? Montreal is still a beautiful urban environment and a walkable environment, and really is what most of America ought to be, right? It really is what most of America ought to be. But we're not there, and it won't, and it's going to take this time, right? Sorry, I was getting a phone number. I think my mother is visiting. So that's where we're at, right? This Macron, all of these financial parties mimics the same human capital migration to Bitcoin that we saw at a small scale in the early days of Bitcoin. It's now reaching global scale, right? The people most interested in subversive machinations by the national security agencies, people like RFK, now more and more interested in Bitcoin simply because of what they've seen, what their expertise is. They're interested in not just cryptography, but its correlation, national security agency activity, right? Hard to deny that Bobby Kennedy comes from that background after everything that happened to his family. And what did Bobby Kennedy say yesterday amidst all of this bullshit, right? Amidst all of this bullshit, Bobby Kennedy also took the time to say the following, right? So he's getting attacked, all of this stuff, right? He comes in and says, I will make sure that we have policies that support Bitcoin and the freedom to transact, and that allow individuals to manage their own Bitcoin wallets, nodes, and passwords, right? So that's where Bobby Kennedy's focus was yesterday, despite all of this stuff, right? So the political people, the people who have a specific interest in brainwashing and psychological operations and NSA activities, those folks already peeling hard into Bitcoin, and more to come. But behind them, not far away, are the non-sentimental people who will help turn the dial here. And we should get to where we're going. All right, let me read a few of these comments, and then I'm going to go check out my mom, who's probably playing Outback with them. All right, let's see what we got. Where am I? Yeah, he looks especially deathly. Yeah. I didn't see the Owen Benjamin stuff against RFK. Didn't see that. You know, a lot of people's narrative closure requires Trump to win this time. So some people who think that this stuff can be saved through politics perhaps don't understand that, you know, to me anyway, Trump was only important to get elected, right? The amount of lying that happened after he got elected has been worth it, like the Russia Gate and all that, right? It exposed a lot, but it's not his policies that I like about him, right? I'm not a policy Trump guy. Well, some of them are great, right? But there you go. Hello, Wisconsin. Hello, Wisconsin. Wisconsin. Remember that 70s show? I instinctively identify the sub story as just another. Yeah, Louis, most Bitcoiners did. That's kind of what I want to say, right? We're already at that level. Once you've sort of got Bitcoin acceptance here, you know, you're not. This is a little crooked all episode. I could have done a better job of straightening it out for you guys. That's okay. Didn't look too bad though. I got to figure out that sizing there. That's okay. Seems like Bitcoin grief is transitioning from anger to bargaining phase right now. Well, what I'm saying, Narwhal, is that Bitcoiners are not actually in a stage of grief, if you will, right? Like the only thing that stressed me out this year in the number go down situation was the bankruptcies and the difficulty in businesses. It wasn't that we were going to win or lose. Like, I don't grieve Bitcoin's prices. So I wouldn't even put the Bitcoin grief as a frame to see this. That's what I see though. I think Bitcoiners are already out of this situation, right? Nepotism at its finest. Perhaps that corruption keeps us all warm and safe at night. Yeah, it's nuts, huh? It's nuts. The media is so corrupt. Happened hours or days ago. They act like they care. Yeah, you can't let it get you anger though. That's something that I've said for a long time. For those of you who are new here, my approach to COVID, for example, was like pure Bitcoiner, right? You know what my approach to COVID at the start was? Don't expect anything right from them and never get angry at their stupid mistakes because they're only going to make stupid mistakes. The stupid mistakes are not going to end. So my approach was to cheat them back. I said they're going to lie and cheat and steal. So what did I do? Right? I lied and cheated. I forged every document I could, every test. I traveled like a fiend, normal travel, didn't care. I just assumed the rules didn't apply to me. I'm a Bitcoiner. I don't have to listen to the mandate shit, right? You could do all of this stuff. Now, I met a lot of people there had made a point. They were going to fight it, not get the vaccine and all that. Well, that was one option. The other option was to cheat them back. It felt good, right? I never got any anger or anything like that. It was a party time, right? Flights were cheap, man. It was great. Went all over the place. So there you go. I think it's an app model. It was shattering to learn about fiat, a real breakup, an abusive relationship. Yeah, that's exactly why I use the frame breakup. That's exactly why the show is called The Breakup. And there's no way to sell Bitcoin to people by saying, hey, it's 21 million, right? P2P transactions. Did you read the white paper? Satoshi, right? Better to teach people the system is what you're selling to buy Bitcoin, right? And why you should sell it. That's the approach we take here, right? More convincing, I think. Right. Oh. A Japanese documentary. I missed what the Japanese. What am I? Let me know what the Japanese documentary was. Oh, I missed a lot of this dying. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Well, I missed some of this stuff. Sorry about that, guys. All right. Is Hal Finney Satoshi? I don't think so, Diesel. No, I'm a pretty I'm a pretty big Nick Szabo is Satoshi guy. I don't really even bother thinking about it much more than that. But that's just me. I love your commitment. Thanks, Diesel Kane. I'd assume Nolan was Canadian intelligence, but he's too smart. No, I was. So I worked for someone who was. That's how I learned about a lot of this stuff. But because I was politically active, they couldn't get their hands on me. They tried. To get my security clearance, for example, when I worked for the Prime Minister, because I was pretty young when I went and worked in that world. I was still a law student. I was going into my sophomore year at law school. So I did have to go to our CIA in Canada, and they do this big interview. They knew everything about me, all the Russian crazy borders I'd crossed and all my weird time. I was very shocked by a lot of it. So I had to get top secret security clearance. And within that interview, it was like hours long. You could tell they were trying to, it was, first of all, very skillful interviewers, right? So they get you to tell stories, and then they find ways for you to retell the same story, but like from a different angle. And that's how they can tell if you're lying or whatever. But what happened was, so I went through all of that, and I needed my security clearance because I was working on the political side of things. And now the political people knew that there's all kinds of sort of spying going on from national intelligence. And they more or less tried to, hey, we got extra work, that kind of stuff. But what ended up happening was the guy I worked with was a former spy for Canada. And he was like my mentor for years. So he right away said, stay away from those people. They're very dangerous. Don't listen to anyone like this, like this, like this. And then for years, I worked directly for him, where he literally just off book taught me everything. Right. So I got access to information, and I didn't have to pay the same price that most people in that world have to pay. So 100% not, but I know all the tricks. I mean, literally all the tricks. He ended up going to work for a major, well, I don't want to give away too much, but a very interesting person, put it that way, and a great guy. And a Bitcoiner. I wouldn't have been able to get the Bitcoin study off the ground if it wasn't for him, put it that way. Very influential person. So, and he understands all of how you manipulate people, frankly. That's what he did. If the G7 lose France, could this be the beginning of the end for the EU? P-Man Van, I don't know about the beginning of the end. I think we're in the last stages of the EU. So I don't know about beginning of the end. I think it's already, I don't think it's going to last much longer. So I'm a little ahead on that. I don't think that the G7 will lose France. I just don't think France will leave NATO again, right? I think they're clear on that. They've left NATO before. They have their own military industrial complex, if you guys didn't know that. A very serious one of the only other ones in the world. So they don't all, I mean, that if you go back, here was a thing that no one noticed in the news, but this is how, if you spend time with spies, they'll tell you this was the news. If you remember when Australia bought nuclear submarines from the United States, they were supposed to have bought them from France, and America got involved, fucked France on the deal. Immediately, what did Macron do? This was before a lot of the trouble. This was over a year ago. Immediately, Macron went and said, we're going to build nuclear reactors up and down France. Why would the nuclear reactor question come on the heels of a military spending, expenditure, purchase, fight, row between the United States? Because that's them saying we're not observing the petrodollar anymore. The point of us not selling this stuff was to observe the petrodollar. And now not building nuclear reactors was the petrodollar. And for global stability, France can't be too nuked up, blah, 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 blah. Remember when France was testing its nuclear bombs in the 90s, they were already persona non grata in the world. So they don't give a shit about this stuff. And Macron did that and said, okay, you're going to go and jump in on a nuke sub deal. All right, well, we got an answer for that. Fuck your oil, right? And those were simultaneous. Go and check the news at the time. So that's not the thing that the mainstream news will tell you about. That's what you'll learn about here. And now I don't have proof that that's what happened, but that's what happened, right? Bingo, you can't ignore Bitcoin when you can't ignore the dollar. Yeah, that's it, Tommy. Really appreciate this morning's talk. Thanks, man. Stages of Grief is a useful framework for understanding our present situation in America. Thanks. Well, thank Bitcoin Graffiti, because it was a moment of synchronicity that allowed this to happen. If you missed the first start of the show, Bitcoin Graffiti had sent me this exact outline saying you should do a whiteboard on this just last week. And then I saw someone pull up the same screenshot that Bitcoin Graffiti shared with me. So I said, there it is. There's the whiteboard. So there you go. Great framing. Thanks a lot, man. All that altcoins are pretty bargainy too. Let's build a Ponzi on Bitcoin. You're right, Bitcoin Graffiti. I would say the altcoin stuff is absolutely part of that, right? That's a perfect observation. My non-BTC friends, why do you care about currency so much? They don't even think about the dollar as just a thing. Yeah. BRICS will hopefully adopt Bitcoin. I don't know if they do. Well, did you guys see these rumors? Holy shit. I didn't even bring this up yet today. If this is true, we actually win by the end of the summer. Like the World War III is over, right? It's over. Because remember, World War III is over when your average American and your average Chinese person and your average Russian realize they're in the same fight, right? They're in the same fight and they have the same weapons. So what's happening in China right now? They're talking about putting Bitcoin back in the market. China, the most naturally inclined human population in the world towards Bitcoin, because they basically, the other reason why this is called the breakup is because I realized in 2016 when I was in China that Chinese people had a major advantage over Americans. They weren't patriotic about their money. They had less grief to go through to come to Bitcoin acceptance. They didn't have to kill any shibboleths. They didn't have to kill any sacred cows. They could just enjoy Bitcoin, right? They had culture, and they knew that the yuan wasn't their culture. So I understood right away that Americans had a problem, something that the rest of the world didn't have. Patriotism mixed up with money. What a crazy thing. As if Americans don't have enough to be patriotic and proud about. Why put money on the list? So stupid, right? We did it, right? Great new title for a show. Split or Splat. 70% of people don't understand how money works. They were brainwashed 200 years ago. Unfortunately, Diesel came. But again, I don't think they're going to have to learn how money works, right? Bitcoin is about lowering the IQ to participate, right? When the central bankers amped up the complexity theater around money, they turn people off. Money is easy. It's not as hard as everyone says. It's really not. Bitcoin simplified that. Now, we had this conversation yesterday. The protocol of Bitcoin, of course, I still don't understand it. I'm not even close. Right? I try, and I've studied it closely. I'm still missing all kinds of parts. I couldn't just explain how Bitcoin works operationally in the protocol to you in any coherent way. I could do it, but it wouldn't be famous, right? It wouldn't go viral. It wouldn't be like the right combination of words that everyone gets, because that part's complicated. But Bitcoin itself, right? The way I think about it is you can count it, right? That's it. That's like in the end what matters, right? You can count it. I think intuitively the human soul craves righteousness, and Bitcoin is righteous money. Just a hypothesis. Yeah, I'm down there with that. Yeah. Truth, people have appetite for that. There's a feeling to truth, right? Bro, will Bitcoin go up a lot today? I don't know about today. I get this shit wrong, but look, Ansel Linder, he does a thing every couple of days. I did a show with Ansel Linder yesterday. He gets this stuff right a lot, right? I don't think too much about prices, and can be a form of delusion, adopting some kind of reality denying framework. That's cognitive dissonance. Yeah, that is cognitive dissonance right there, where you have, and the signs of that are when your reality denying framework sounds like word salad. Oh, it's we can't have Bobby Kennedy because it would mean the dialectic of scientific method no longer is consistent with the pedagogy. Kill yourself, right? Move to Canada, get a needle, die. Hi, Mom. Yeah, I think she's here. We'll see. I haven't seen her come around. Bro is not answering me. Great framework, explains a lot. Yeah, up forever. No. It wasn't Laura. It was Deidre. It was up forever, Deidre. You know what? I forget what it was, but she said something stupid, and she made my show once, and I think I called it "It's Going Up Forever, Deirdre," because of something ridiculous that she said. Macro grieving, yeah. Narwhal tacos, yeah. I was commenting about the greater social phase as I see it. Yeah, thanks, Bitcoin Graffiti. Yeah. Fiat is dying. Bitcoin is a way toward. Yeah, and again, imagine that Bitcoiners. It's like a subject, Bitcoin acceptance, right? It's part of the stages of grief. Like it's a weird commercial thing, but there you go. The Crypto Wars from Aaron Von Weirdum's tweet. Yeah, I didn't see that one. I'll go check it out. I will enjoy the day with my mummy. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, sorry, Cat 23. You're right. We don't talk about his origin. Yeah, I take it back. You didn't hear what I said. We're amongst friends, but you're right. We shouldn't talk about it publicly too much. Don't want to give it away. Was Satoshi? I don't think so. Don't think so. Some people say that. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, but it could. I mean, only because like I said, I've met some of these people. I just don't see the IQ there. Like I don't see the vision. Whoever writes that well as Satoshi probably isn't working for the NSA. They don't pay enough. By the time Australia gets those subs, they will be old technology. Australians getting ripped off. Australia is a shithole. Of course they're getting ripped off. It's like Canada, full of dumb people. Like some of the dumbest people in the world. I think the New Zealanders are dumber, but I'm not sure. It's hard to say. We should do like a show of their ignorance, like one of the, how they wanted a debate for the RFK, but we should do it like a Jeopardy, but who can answer wrong about all whoever's fallen for the most hoaxes. The world champion hoax faller for is probably an Australian or a New Zealander. I would say Canadians would make a run. There would be a lot of support in Canada for like a competition to see who's bought the most hoaxes. There'd be some good American challengers there. I won't deny America's full of idiots. I won't deny that. So Whitney Webb has outlined that literally a state merged with the mob. Oh, they did. Yeah, Whitney Webb is great, isn't it? Oh, we got some Jekyll Island pushing here from Daniel, which is a great book. You can get it on YouTube, Daniel tells me, and the secrets to all of this stuff is in there or are in there. What is this about? Bitcoin and altcoins do different things and have different purposes. Why do maxis hate on alts? Do alts take away from market share? The tribalism seems silly overall. Well, it's more... why not put your energy? It's more of a directed energy thing, right? Like we only get so many punches to win the fight. Why bother with punching a rope in the corner of the ring instead of your opponent? And that thing really little. So I get it. Like now I'm of the mind that we need to make Ethereum a much bigger scam to take Wall Street down, right? But that's just me. And finally here, there's a good YouTube video on the creature from Jekyll Island from the author who explains the process of the creation of the Federal Reserve. Indeed, bud. All right, that's all I got for today, everyone. I've got family looking to talk with me. I don't know what's going on, but we're going to find out. All right, peace, everyone.